And yet I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Welcome to Against the Grain, where curiosity leads the way.
Andy, how you doing, mate? Good to see you.
Yeah, it's nice to be here.
So, last pictures I saw of you posted online, you were out in Roswell. Can you tell us what's going on over there?
I was. So, for years, I've always wanted to go to Roswell and try and get as near to Area 51 in Nevada as well that I could. So my wife and I, we're both really fascinated by these things, had a big road trip across the southwest of America, and it was really, really interesting to be there. So, I mean, knowing exactly the spot where the 1947 Roswell crash, alleged, but we think there was it's hard. You've got to know the right people, but you can get to the general area. And it was just really interesting to just get a feel for the landscape, and then go to the museum, and where we bumped into Donald Schmitt, who is one of the great sort of Roswell researchers. So that was really good. Have a chat with him, but also to go to Area 51. And you go to the little cafe there, the little Alien, as it's called, and just to get a look at the gates of the place is fascinating. And then all the sirens go off if you get too near, as indeed they did.
Do they?
Yeah. So it's really funny. I think they do it to scare the tourists off. No one comes out, nothing happens. They don't shoot you, but they let you know, in no uncertain terms, they don't want you there, and then you drive away. But it's really still, nonetheless, it's really, really interesting to be out there and see it. Yeah, so it was a very good trip.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, it's always nice, isn't it, to do those sort of trips where, you've always wanted to go and get a feel for the air, because that's what you said, isn't it? I want to get a feel for it, because you can't get near where it happened, but just to be in the proximity to get a feel. And what did you feel?
I think what really struck me at Roswell and seeing the museum there, at first glance it's all quite kitsch, but then you realise when you start to look at the displays, they really take it seriously. And the people that set it up were originally witnesses. And I hadn't realised till I started to research this before I went there, and in the weeks since I came back, just how many witnesses there are to something that was very definitely not a weather balloon. You got around 600 witnesses or relatives of witnesses who've all testified saying, look, something really serious happened here, which I kind of assumed, but really doing some hard work looking at it, I'm now pretty convinced that whatever it wasn't a weather balloon, it wasn't an aeroplane, it wasn't Stalin genetically engineering human beings and dropping them there, which is another new theory, which to me is actually more balmy than aliens coming to Earth. And something I think important happened, in the world we're in now, where UAPs, stroke UFOs, are being openly discussed in Congress. You realise that this was probably a big moment, and it's not the only alleged crash. Clearly, I think the authorities know a lot more than they're letting on. Almost certainly they're trying to reverse engineer this stuff, make military technology. It's an old rumour, this is nothing new, but I think the fact that it is coming to light in a new way and rising to the surface, and there's so many now, quite high up whistleblowers queuing up to testify. We're in new times, and the authorities are still denying, saying no, we've got no evidence that it's alien, and yet what they have accepted is there is a phenomenon. There are things flying around that defy all the known laws of physics as we have previously decreed them. And that in itself, to me, changes the world. Because whether they say they're alien or not alien, and some black ops military thing instead, well, you're still admitting there is technology flying around that changes the world. If that gets public, which one day it will, there's the whole basis of science and economy and everything we've known out the window. And then you plus that with the new world of AI coming up, and you realise, these really are new times ahead.
They really are. And I mean, the UFO thing, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because as you know, right, coming from a crop circle background, and I've tried as much as I possibly can to sort of say, look, you know, I'm a crop circle researcher. I have an interest in UFOs, but I'm not a ufologist, but I have an interest, because who wouldn't, right? And as you know, I've worked alongside. I met Donald Schmidt actually back in 2010, I think, in Mexico. I spoke at a conference where he was. Nice, really nice guy, isn't he?
Very nice.
And that's the thing, on the circuit, you get to meet these people, and you know, you hear stories. And for example, I got a good friend, Marco, who worked with James Fox to produce the Varginha case in Brazil. And when they were producing that movie, they just decided to go out on the streets and put a sign up and see who could come over and talk to them about being a witness to that event. And in a day, so many people came forward to just sort of say, I was there, I saw this, and we were there when they closed off the roads, or this happened or that happened, and so on. And I was talking to a friend the other night, and we were talking about Jeffrey Cry Powell saying about this experience as evidence has to be taken more seriously. And if something comes out of all what's going on at the moment with the Pentagon and Congress and so on, if it's that there are so many people who, you know, have experienced something like this or witnessed something like this, their evidence is, although not empirically, you know, verifiable and so on, the preponderance of it and the weight of it and the amount of it must now come into consideration.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing. There's that. Yes, it's anecdotal on one level, but on the other hand, now you know the U.S. Navy has released its own footage, and you can see the Tic Tac UFO and the gimbal UFO and all of this, which they've accepted are real. The thing is, so you've got people who have testified to what they saw with their own eyes, plus you've got that film. And if people are just going to keep saying, well, they're all liars, you then get to a point where there's a hell of a lot of very high-level liars, which, okay, there are, but I think that clearly are not. It's a lazy way of dealing with the world. And I think that this evidence is accruing now so much that we do have to now say, all right, look, enough people in high places are discussing this. There must be something to it. And just to keep ignoring it, just to keep pretending the world hasn't changed, I don't think that's going to do for much longer. The clamour now for more, well, some proper level of disclosure, I think is growing. I don't think that will go away. And I think there will come a time where, if authorities don't say more, then it's going to come out in some what they call, you know, catastrophic disclosure way. It's going to come out messily and in a very undeniable way that won't be filtered in any kind of calm, gentle way at all, and that could actually do more damage. So I'd like to believe the authorities would at least realise it's time to say a bit more. I don't think there's going to be full disclosure for a long time, personally, but I think there will have to be more than what there is now. And yeah, just to keep now saying that all these people are mad and lying, that just doesn't wash, because the people that are saying these things are really, you know, very prominent. And yet, even there, when you see the Tic Tac video, and if you haven't seen it, anybody go and look it up, you got this thing flying around at incredible speeds, right? Turning manoeuvres and all of this, and yet you've still got skeptics saying, no, it's balloons. And that's, for me, that is the most silly, unscientific approach you could have, when it very obviously is not. And you've got so many people that testified at the time that this was a really extraordinary object that they saw. So we're still at that silly level of denial that it's time to move on from. Now, let's get real about it. Let's get serious.
Well, surprisingly, though, the recent revelation to Congress, or the recent update to Congress that was given by, I can't remember the guy's name, Graves, I think it was, which has been
Ryan
he said about
Graves,
that's it, Ryan Graves. He said about that those Tic Tacs were actually anomalies in the radar, and so there seems to be some. You know, and then Daniel Sheehan gave an interview to Ross Coulthard afterward and said this is absolute lies. And so there's all this This is the issue.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
but this is the muddying of it. No, so David Fravor and Ryan Graves, I think they were very much that these were real. I think, as far as I understand, they did show up on radar, but they weren't just radar blips. People actually saw them, and they've released the film. So what are they saying the film is?
Yes.
They're saying they faked the film. But this is all part of the muddying. This is what they're trying to do, is to muddy it so much that nobody in the public will be able to tell what's going on. It's an old technique, we know that, from crop circle years and that, and it's still a technique that works to a degree, but, when you actually look at the polls as to what people believe, and how many people are now open to the fact that something is coming here visiting us, they're in a way beginning to look like they're the marginalised ones by keeping up this silly sort of process of setting one faction against the other. But I don't think in the end that's going to wash, because they're having to then ridicule their own personnel, and you're effectively saying their own personnel are not reliable, and they're all rubbish at what they do. Well, they're clearly not. So something's going to have to change.
But what you say there, that the David Grush release. I interviewed Chrissy Newton the other night, and she runs a podcast show called Rebelliously Curious on the Debrief, and the recent David Grush revelations came out through Leslie Keane and Ralph Blumenthal. And the Washington Post didn't want to run it, so they went through Chrissy on her podcast show. The first release of David Grush's story, being the whistleblower, came out then. And so I questioned her about the way it was presented. So, when the titles of the show come up, it was, this man's come out as a whistleblower, he's got highly classified information that's going to change everything, and that the government have been running on these secret programs for years, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So then I watched the podcast, and Leslie Keane speaks first and talks about the fact that there was a pressure to release the story because things were getting a bit dicey, and he was starting to get threats, and it was getting dangerous, and their source, the best way to protect a source is to get the story out there. And then it cuts to Ralph Blumenthal, and Chrissy's asking questions about what will happen to him, what will be the repercussions and so on for David Grush coming forward. And then Ralph Blumenthal says, well, nothing he's said has been, is illegal because it's all been sanctioned by the Pentagon. And then when you look at David Grush's evidence, he's not saying, I've seen this. He's saying, I've spoken to people who've told me they've seen this. And so, there are obviously then all sorts of different directions with different levels of what people will speculate about some kind of ongoing long game conspiracy with the way the story's being released. Pentagon is saying, yeah, you can say it, but we're not putting our names to it. So there's a distance there. David Grush is saying, I never saw it. I've got some friends who've seen it, and they've told me, whoa. And so where I am with all of this is that from 2017, from the original New York Times story being released about the Tic Tacs and so on, which are highly decontextualized images, albeit that they are images, and they're showing the speed and the pilot woohooing and all that stuff adds the drama. But they're like old video games with little blips, aren't they? They're very decontextualized videos that take something
they are
of
surely
what it could
also
be away.
Yeah, they're not the detailed videos they must surely have. Yeah, they make sure it's very low resolution. I mean, of course, some people are cynical, and they think the whole thing is this is in itself conspiracy to kind of focus you on couple of very small cases, fuzzy video, so that you then get distracted from the big stuff. I mean, the problem with David Grush is the very point that you mentioned, which is that, of course, he didn't see this stuff. He's just reporting, look, I know these people in high levels who have claimed there are alien craft, there are alien bodies, and it's all true. But because he himself hasn't seen it, that's enabled the people trying to attack him to say, well, there you go, the guy's just a fantasist. But the fact is, until he came forward with that, he was, a top military intelligence officer. Why would he suddenly do this to himself over nothing? Unless, as some people say, well, the whole thing, he's a shill and he's being paid and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. What it feels like to me is there's enough of a level of reality to it where even if we're not being told the whole truth, I think there's a partial truth here. And either way, it's blown the lid off something which isn't just going to go away now. It can't go away now.
No, I agree with you there. They can't say there's no phenomenon, but I guess what I'm saying is that there's, and I think we'd agree on this, is that there's a stage management going on with how. I mean, I remember Nick Pope saying years ago, disclosure will be with not with a capital D. It will come out slowly. And so, from 2017 to now, we haven't really seen much, but we've been told, oh, you want to see what we've got in the back room, it's going to blow your socks off and stuff. But still not very much has come out, except the day before yesterday. I think, I haven't looked at the details, but there's been some latest revelation with Project Kona or something. I saw.
Oh, so that would be Blue Kona. Well, it's not that much of a revelation. In brief, Blue Kona is a project that apparently was suggested, this is what's been saying, to get hold of alien tech and reverse engineer it. Well, we've all believed that's been going on for years anyway. But a paper's actually come out that shows there was such a project. But then what they've said is, but they never initiated it. It didn't go anywhere. Well, do you want to believe that?
Yeah.
So what they're saying is, yes, there was a plan. It was called Blue Kona, but we didn't really do much about it, so it just drifted. Well, it's another muddying of the water. It kind of is telling you something and yet not telling you anything, and it's like the UAP Act, which they brought in the States just recently, where the idea was to get the authorities to be compelled to release more of this information. But actually, what they said in the end was the Act compels you to record this information, but you don't necessarily have to share it if you don't think it's a good idea. Well, that doesn't really get us anywhere further than where we are today, really. So that was a very watered-down disappointment. But the fact that there even had to be an Act, that in itself was response to this pressure from people like Tim Burchett trying to push the Congress thing and all of that, tells you, nonetheless, that we're in different times. So I don't think that will go nowhere. We're going to have to be patient. Yeah, I take the point about disclosure with a small d, and that's kind of my feeling. I think it will gradually build up. And of course, we don't know, and this is always the issue, maybe they've got very good reasons for not telling us. Maybe they think the public would panic. Maybe they think we'd all sort of be struggling because of our religious beliefs or whatever. I mean, it would be a shock to some people. We're used to talking about this kind of thing, of course, but you don't know. Maybe they feel the culture shock of it is a big thing. But the other argument that I've heard is that, of course, the military-industrial complex and big companies like Lockheed Martin and all of that, they want this tech for themselves. They want to get every commercial and indeed military advantage from it they can. They don't want it to go public until they absolutely have to, because they want to get everything they can from it. And I'm very sure China and Russia are doing exactly the same thing. We always focus on America as being the only country that has any kind of interest in this. That's clearly not true. It's just that I think there's been more compulsion to get it out there in America. And of course, Russia and China are very closed compared to what we got in the West. So same phenomenon, I don't doubt, but there's a much bigger thing going on here, and where it goes, I don't know at the moment, but it will go somewhere.
It's an unfolding story. I often wonder, I think, I thought every now and again, I wonder how long it will take before they go, okay, the crop circles, we did a number on that because of the same reasons maybe that you suggested, that it would be too much of a culture shock, we had to put the lid on this, or whatever reason. But when they're making disclosure now with some videos and some I mean, to me the biggest thing is Gary Nolan. When Gary Nolan was approached by the CIA 10 years ago, look, we've got these pilots, they've had these close encounters, can you examine them with your high-tech equipment to see if anything's physically happened to them? And he's found an abundance of evidence that they've been affected. That, to me, blows the lid off any grainy videos, or do you know what I mean? I mean, now you've got physical evidence. And so,
well, because Gary Nolan's gone on to create the Soul Foundation, and they're doing amazing work because they're getting very credible speakers to actually start to give presentations about this and start to speak out about it. And these are not idiots; they're not your normal UFO researchers.
No,
they're very
propulsion
highly qualified
engineers
people.
and
So yeah, Gary Nolan's, I think, a key figure in all of this, and there's a few key figures. Of course, Daniel Sheehan is another one trying to kind of get more freedom of speech over it. There's a lot of high level people with real skills who were previously respected, who are now involved, and I think that helps enormously. And I think that's, again, one of the big differences we've now got. It's not your standard kind of way we've always been portrayed as sort of silly, wacky people wandering around. These are very sensible, credible people.
I agree with you. New Heretics. I haven't got to the end of it. I've got halfway through New Heretics. I would go back a little bit, right? Because one of your chapters, which is the first chapter I read, and then I went to the beginning and started reading back until I got to that chapter, is the chapter on crop circles. And, there's so many echoes of what happened to me in the story of what happened to you. I think that we're not the only ones, are we? You come into something like the crop circles, and then I had this phrase, informing other activities, because I found that these things applied in political stories or drug company stories or cover-ups about this, or the way the media treats these stories, and then the psychology of the way people respond to these kinds of phenomena and so on. You were investigating the paranormal before you came to the crop circles. When you got to the crop circles, how much of a big change did that make for you in your research at that time? What was it that really hit you between the eyes?
I mean, I should be very honest here. I mean, I had an interest in the paranormal. I was certainly not researching it. I was too busy in the music world.
Oh, okay.
I was a musician, and so I noted what was going on. I could see stuff was happening. Always had a fascination. My mum and dad had the book Chariots of the Gods when I was small, so that kind of stuff was always around, and I always, therefore, had a kind of an openness towards that. But yeah, no, so I've been very firmly, I was a musician, I was gigging, I was writing music. That was my world at that point, working in PR as well for a while. And then in the West Country in 1991, I was down there, and I knew, of course, hey, look, I know crop circles appear around here. Wouldn't it be kind of cool to see some? Now, what I hadn't realised then was that actually there'd already been quite a few in Sussex, where I live, which is in the southeast of England. But anyway, I had to be over in Wiltshire, where I saw my first crop circles. The place we were staying, we said to the lady running the bed and breakfast place, is there anywhere we could see any crop circles around here? And she was all very keen and brought out the maps and saying, oh yes, well if you go here, and if you go here, and if you drive there, you're going to see one that's just arrived this week, and that one was that, and so on. And it was like, wow, there's loads of them around here. And we went, and I was completely amazed. And what I have to say here is that I think it was beyond just a mental thing. There was a feeling as soon as I saw my first crop circle at Maisie Farm, near Hackpen Hill way-ish. It was quite a misty day. It wasn't a beautiful day or anything. It was quite heavy mist over the fields. But under this mist, you could see the shape in the field. I just had the bizarrest feeling in the pit of my stomach, which I'm now putting a voice to this, but at the time the feeling was that this is meaningful, this is going to change everything. Now, I didn't use those words, but that was the feeling.
Sure.
And indeed, so the next couple of days was just a blur of wanting to go from crop circle to crop circle and walking in them and realising very, very quickly nobody knew what the hell was going on. And nobody could tell me what the answer was, and on one level that was kind of frustrating. On the other level, that made it all the more fascinating. And I just thought, I have absolutely got to know more about this. And then when I got back, and I started telling people in Sussex, wow, you've got to see this crop circle, because a friend of mine went, well, what do you mean? There's one up the road near Brighton. And I realised, my God, they're everywhere. And of course then I started to sort of do lots more driving around, and I very quickly learned that there was the new Centre for Crop Circle Studies, long defunct now, but at the time that had just been set up, and I realised there were other researchers in Sussex doing it. Barry Reynolds then put out words saying, right, anybody want to create their own group? Got together, and before I knew it, we were part of the Sussex Crop Circle investigation team. And really, we're still running today. We've gone through a few different names over the years. We still hold regular meetings and have lectures, and, that's well over 3 decades ago. So here we are, we're still doing it. And all of us felt driven. We wanted to know more about crop circles. We wanted to understand what was going on. But equally, of course, then you start to meet people who are looking into other mysteries. And then you get exposed to other ways of thinking, and then you quickly realise the media was absolutely lying through its teeth about crop circles and putting out things that you just were not true. Whether you thought they were man-made or not, that what they were saying was not true. Like, I'll just give you one good example. Some comedy quiz show had a question about when were the first crop circles, and I already knew by then they'd been going on potentially for hundreds of years, certainly photographs going back to the 1940s, 1930s, and they say categorically, no, they only began in the 1980s. You thought, no, they didn't, that is a lie. And then, of course, the whole Doug and Dave thing hit the news, and there's 2 old boys running around with planks of wood, and that's a great story. It has great visual power, of course, and everyone went, there you go, you're all bonkers. We knew it was all a big joke. But anybody that knew anything about the phenomenon quickly realised that cannot be the whole answer. So then, you're driven on further and further to try to show the world, look, there's another side to this. And then you think, well, this must be happening with everything. Every mystery that gets reported, any conspiracy that gets reported, it's probably not being reported accurately. And that led me on the journey that I took to then try to tell people and explore other mysteries and then write about them. And before I know it, I'm writing not only about crop circles and lecturing, but also conspiracy theories, the paranormal in general. And in a way, the book that you mentioned, the new Heretics, which is the current book out there, that's really the culmination of everything, where I realise how much polarisation there is and how much that polarisation is stirred up by not only a foolish media but also a media that I think has an agenda to close all of this down, and certainly the authorities love it when it all gets closed down. And as we mentioned earlier with UFOs, by setting people against each other and then we fall into that trap, it of course dilutes any of the impact that it should have had. So that's why there's that very long section in the book about what people learned from crop circles and the trials and tribulations that we all had to go through to keep this information alive and to keep showing people, look, there really is something here. But equally, like the polarization many people fell into, even within their own community. And the whole moral of the story is you don't actually need to do it that way. There are better ways to acknowledge differences of opinion, but come out of it still agreeing there is something here that we could and we should be putting out there in a way where we agree on what we can agree on. Let's stop the fighting. Let's show people there's something real. And that's true of many avenues of investigation, from the paranormal to conspiracies. Stop the arguing. Agree on the obvious factors. Get it out there, because the arguing is classic divide and rule.
Couldn't agree more, mate. Did you watch Graham Hancock and what's his name, Finkel, the archaeologist, have a debate on Joe Rogan the other day about the Ancient Apocalypse TV show on Netflix?
I haven't seen it yet. I know it happened. I do want to watch it. How did it go?
So it went on for 4 hours 20 minutes. So it was an epic to watch. But my take on it was. Graham was quite emotional. He's been hurt by some of the things that have been said about him being a link to white supremacy and anti-Semitism and all that kind of stuff. Wow. And brought up quite a lot of that, rather than enough of the arguments about why some of these monuments, raise questions about their origins and so on. And so there was some of that. It got heated a couple of times, and Joe Rogan sort of got very close to saying, let's have a cup of coffee. He said a few times, and then it sort of abated a bit. but got through to the end, and there was a heartrending moment at the end when they both realised, or not both realised, but both genuinely felt good that they'd had this debate, and the opposites had come together and been civil to each other for the most part, for the very most part of it, and were able to air their differences and make their arguments and do it in an adult way. And to be on Joe Rogan, which will probably no doubt get 10 million views or something, it could set a precedent for what we really need to end this polarization, to get people to sit down and have a chat about what we've got on the table, what you've got on the table, and let's all do it in the pursuit of truth, because there's just too many agendas that obfuscate all this stuff, isn't there?
So that's fascinating if you're saying they were attacking him for being a white supremacist. That's classic, forget the message, attack the messenger. As far as I know, there is absolutely no truth in that at all. So that's great. So make him out to be a racist, and then you haven't got to deal with any of the information that he's got at all. I mean, Graham, we've had Graham at our Glastonbury Symposium event over the years, and very interesting man indeed. I think he has been hurt by the attacks, and if anybody watched his recent Netflix series, which I found very fascinating, there is a defensive tone in there, which in a way I don't think he has to do, but I understand why he feels the need to do it, because he's been so attacked by academics, and yet what he lays down in front of you, you think, well, it should be looked at the very least, shouldn't it? And that's the thing. We live in a world where things get closed down very quickly, and you're not allowed to have a debate. So if, Rogan actually got to a point where they got beyond that and actually started to, hear each other out, then, that will be a good thing. And I'm pleased to hear that. But, I will catch up with that very soon.
Well, because it speaks to really the main theme of your book, which is the polarization, and the whole gambit of divide and rule, and this has been a game of empires, hasn't it? For the British Empire adopted this in much of their conquests, and or maybe the East India Trading Company did on their path as an outsourcing company, but. That tactic, for example, when I lived in Mexico, the Mexican people were so against Trump that you couldn't have a discussion I was there during the elections in the November, when Trump was when Biden was coming up to beat Trump down, and I couldn't raise any issues for the news show which were negative towards Biden. They literally would have embraced anybody to get Trump out. And what I learned from talking to different Republicans and Democrats was, when you actually asked them what it is they wanted a decent living wage, they wanted affordable housing, good education for their kids, and good access to good health care on both sides. And so then the realization comes that the division is being completely exploited by the media as the tools for it, so that these people are fighting with each other and causing so-called insurrections, which then justify more authoritarian kinds of legislation to spy on everybody. And yet, as you point out in your book, you can't, or it's very difficult to end this polarization. It seems so rigid, where people won't actually stop and listen. And I mean, there was a great example recently where I heard somebody say that there was a TED talk about how do you be a good communicator, and it had millions of views. And there was another one that how do you be a good listener, and hardly anybody had watched it. And to me, I think that's telling, isn't it, of the issue. So how do you, now you've written that book and now you've explored all these different areas where there's all this polarization, what do you see as the way through it, Andy?
I mean, the book lays out that this is a historical tactic. Divide and rule has always been there. You find it in the Roman times, it's always been around. But yeah, it's particularly reached for at the moment. And the silly thing is, so many of us fall into it. And we need to all see what's going on, and I show very clearly in the book how this is done on every level of society. The book kind of builds up, gives some examples, and shows you actually how every advert you see, every news story that is thrown at you, it wants you to react. It's what we call reaction culture, normally with alarm or outrage or shock, and then you shake your fist at the other person over there, and then soon everybody's just shouting at each other over a divide. And what gets lost, because we're all reacting, we're not thinking, is nuance. And nuanced thinking and understanding of why somebody over there might have a different viewpoint to you is something that nobody thinks to do anymore. So we need to learn to actually, if not to agree with the other person, obviously, you've got to have an opinion, you've got to stand up for what you believe in, but you need to understand why somebody else might have another view. And the new Heretics, it stands up for people like us trying to get alternative views out there and to try to say this is why people believe them. And it covers an awful lot of ground there, an awful lot of different theories. And it says this is why people believe them. They have a right to believe them. You might not agree with it, but this is why. And I'm pleased to say I have had some reactions to the book from people that have actually got the point. Like there's a whole long chapter about the huge, massive debates about vaccinations. And, of course, the COVID vaccine. And we're not going to get into the ins and outs of that. Otherwise, we'll get taken down, no doubt. But the point being that it's not biased. It was just about, look, these are the arguments. Why can't we hear out both sides and then make out your own minds?
Yeah.
And I did. I had a lovely email from a lady in New Zealand who'd been, very, very pro-vaccine during the whole COVID thing. But she came out and said, I finally understood why people feel the way they do. I was so angry with all the anti-vaxxers. I wanted to, absolutely sweep them away. And you've actually made me understand, even though I still don't agree with them, you've made me understand how they got to think that way. And it's given me a whole new way of dealing with it. And I thought, brilliant. That's what the book's trying to do. It's not even wanting to change your mind on anything, but it's about there are ways we can cut through this. There are better ways we can try and find a way to truth. And there are ways where you don't have to be polarized, but you've got to be so canny. You've got to look at your own mind. You've got to look at the way that you treat other people when they say something that you don't like, and try to really get down to why am I feeling this way? Why am I reacting? And understand that reaction, and then try to measure it and try to say that person over there that disagrees with me is not evil, because that's what we do. We always demonize them. They're not evil necessarily, but they just disagree. And I'm going to try and get into their headspace. It can be done. And by the end of the book, it kind of lays out, look, there are techniques you can use. If you don't, you're a slave. You are a slave to the powers that be that all want us at each other's throats. And then, of course, they can bring in the very legislation, the very oppression that they want to try to sort it all out. Well, that's absolutely falling into the trap. Don't do it. And I was really struck this week by a very sad story that at the court building where the Donald Trump trial is currently going on, and a protester who was obviously very upset about the New World Order, didn't like either Trump or Biden, was holding up placards saying, both Trump and Biden, they're both working for the fascists or whatever. In other words, it's all a conspiracy. He set light to himself. Yeah. And killed himself. Yeah. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. That obviously there's issues going on there, so it's complex. But I thought to get to that state is so sad. We don't need to get to that state. He could have done something positive with that. That's his belief. Okay, great. That's a belief for quite a few people. But if you get to the point where you then self-destruct, what have you done? You've handed victory to the very people you're opposing on a plate. And that's one less of them, and he's dead now. And to me, that makes me feel sick that it had to get to that stage. And obviously, I don't know his history, I don't know his mental health, blah, blah, blah. But, there's other people that I know that I sometimes worry for. They get so sucked in and so angry at, the agenda and conspiracies and all of that, and they have a right to be angry, but then it goes inwards and it blackens them, instead of saying, hang on, so I'm going to do what I can do, but I'm going to actually keep up the positivity here, because I'm not going to let them win. And when we let the darkness in and it somehow gets inside, then they win. And we saw that in the crop circle world. For those that wanted to shut the debate down, for those that, just wanted everybody to think it's all man-made, it's all a big joke. There were some researchers that were so kind of like pulled into that. In the end, they became desperate not to appear to be fools. They wouldn't say anything positive about a crop circle anymore because they didn't want to look stupid in the media and all of that. And the result was everything just crumbled around them anyway, and their reputations crumbled, because you've got to stand up for what you believe in, but equally you mustn't let the darkness of those attacking you get in. If you let it get in, right, you're done for. And I'm not saying you shouldn't recognise why people are disagreeing with you. That's the very point the book makes. You do need to recognise it, and if you can try to understand why someone's disagreeing with you, that's fine. But you then don't let that go further than that. You say, okay, I understand it, now I'm going to deal with it in a positive way. But yeah, if you're going to start setting light to yourself because you're afraid of the New World Order, well, if everyone does that, the New World Order's going to go, fantastic, let's get rid of the lot of them. Let's not do it. Let's not even get anywhere near that level, because that to me is a sad indictment. There's better ways to fight things that you feel, you've got to fight against.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you're never gonna account, particularly the mental health of people. It's not a secret anymore, is it? That mental health has been in decline for a number of years, and so extreme reactions like that are going to be more prevalent. Unfortunately, that will probably justify more legislation for more censorship, because that's the extreme conspiracy theory views will have affected his mind, and therefore this is what they can do to people, so we need to protect you from this, so we're not going to expose you to any of this nonsense information anymore. So as you say, you hand them a victory really in a number of ways if you go to those extremes. But what you just described about not letting the darkness in and being able to listen to the other side of the argument dispassionately and so forth, to be honest, I mean, that's taken me years. I went through the whole gambit of being the Manic Street Preacher at first, when I realised there's something going on with the crop circles and nobody's bloody paying any attention. Then, my teacher, the guy that took me to the crop circles, he was from the States, and he'd been an activist since the Vietnam War, and had been at Haight-Ashbury, and came from a wealthy family that involved various elements of the government interfering with their family. So he was a typical American in some ways, of like conspiracies, talking about what the CIA did with this and what the CIA did with this, and was telling me about how the CIA were involved in with the British in covering up the crop circles. That was my early introduction to all of this, and I realised not quick enough really how easily you can fall into a dark pit with that, and then it's paranoia and and all the rest of it can easily ensue. So it's actually not an easy process that you describe, is it, to be able to get somebody to be able to sit there dispassionately and listen to somebody's argument and balance it. Particularly, on the other hand as well, that came to mind, you've been in PR, the forces that are at work to manufacture this kind of reactionary these responses from people, the way that they're making them react as they are, Facebook posts this way and gets destroyed, and using all that kind of language, this sort of destructive language that gets people to click on it and so on. Those forces are very, very powerful, coming from very educated people who probably know how we tick better than we know ourselves. And so a lot of people that haven't been educated to that or understand anything about PR or communications and stuff like that, it's really difficult, isn't it, to be able to raise them to a certain point and go, look, you're being had, let me show you how you're being had.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
agree?
I did learn a lot from my time in PR, and although it was a fairly small company, we had some quite big clients, and well, I can't name them, but one of them was a major house builder, for instance, and then you realise some of the things you have to put out there. That's when you think, yeah, actually, the way this is being spun is not really how it is it? And I learned. And I was not comfortable with that, so I would try to find a way to be truthful with what was being said as much as possible. But I also learned, how easily the public get manipulated. And certainly, I mean, what I've tried to do in the new Heretics book is show how that works. That there's whole chapters that lay out, look, this is how it works. And the more you react, the more you are being played by other people. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have a feeling or you shouldn't have a passion about something, but that's different to reacting. And when we react, you're at the mercy of somebody else. And often when you actually put it aside, you think, actually, why am I doing this? I mean, going back to crop circles, maybe I was lucky. And Barry Reynolds and myself and Martin Noakes and the people that set up the Sussex Crop Circle group in the early 90s, in a way, we had good timing, because we just started to kind of get into crop circles when the whole Doug and Dave thing happened. So that was the big, it's all man-made, it's all a big joke. And in fact, we had our first meeting just shortly after that had all broken, so we'd all been on our own journeys with this, and then we gathered. And what that did was we came in on a baptism of fire, and we very quickly saw the mistakes that some of the earlier researchers were making in the way they were trying to deal with this. And we observed that and learned very quickly, okay, let's not get pulled into this. And I'm not saying we didn't get pulled into some silly stuff, because I think we did, and silly vendettas, arguing about this, that, or the other about circles. But I think we soon realised, okay, that's not really an answer, is it? And we kind of pulled back from that. And in the end, our kind of, well, it wasn't unspoken, we talked about it. Our approach became, let's say what we see. Let's not judge. Let's not say, we've seen this, so it therefore means that, and you better believe me. It's, we see this. This is what we found in this crop circle. It had this effect in it. It looked a bit like this. It was very neat. It was a little bit wobbly. But then not attaching that to saying, therefore it was made by aliens, or therefore it was definitely made by people. Actually, other people can do that if they want. And actually, that was the best thing we ever did. And we just settled back. And we did some work, quite famously, using psychics and not even knowing whether it worked or not, and getting channelings and stuff. And we had one particular channeling, whatever you think about it, even if you think it's all rubbish, it's still, what comes through can be really interesting. And we got this message up on top of Sisbury Ring, which is a very well-known hill fort in West Sussex. And the message came through Paul Burer, who was our psychic we were working with, sadly no longer with us. And the message was, look, stop trying to prove things to people. You think that if you get the proof, everyone's going to believe you, and everyone's going to suddenly say, oh yes, this phenomenon is real. And he more or less said, it's not going to work like that. Stop trying to prove it. Do it for yourselves. Do it for your own self-satisfaction and inner knowing. But you think you're going to change the world by getting a film of a crop circle appearing or whatever it is, it won't. And then weirdly, of course, within just a short time after that, about a year later, the Oliver's Castle video came forward of the lights flying over the field and the crop circle appears and all of that. And of course it was immediately lambasted and attacked, and people said it was fake, and here we are, more than 25 years later or around that, still they're arguing about it. Still nobody can agree on it. And that was a lesson, and we thought, yeah, it's just true, isn't it? You can have whatever evidence you think, and if people don't want to believe you, they're not going to believe you. So that was useful. So we learnt that, and I've applied that really to everything I do now. That doesn't mean I don't have any feelings about it. I also still get annoyed when I hear skeptics closing down conversations. But my response is to try not to get angry, but to say, right, what can I do to balance that? What can I put out there that balances that? And that's what I do. And in the lectures that I give, for instance, I just share this stuff with people. They can take it or leave it, and some will reject it, and people get up and say, you're bonkers. Fine. It's annoying, but that's their view. But there'll be more people normally who go, okay, this is really interesting, isn't it? Because I don't tell them to believe it. I just say, look, this is kind of interesting. I think this is fascinating. Make of it what you will. they'll come to it by themselves. And that's another lesson I've learned over the years. Don't shake the fist. Don't tell them why they should believe anything. Just say, hey, look, isn't this interesting? They'll make their own minds up. People are actually more intelligent than the media gives them credit for, and they can normally suss out when something's worth looking at and when it isn't. And the ones that don't, well, you can't do anything with them. Don't worry about them, but there's enough people out there who actually, with some reasonable evidence presented, will in the end see, okay, maybe I should have a look at this a bit more. And so that to me has offered me hope, and I've always gone in with that attitude. Well, just reach out to those you can. That's all you can do. Beyond that, stick the kettle on and don't worry about it, because we could all worry ourselves to death and get angry and give ourselves strokes by being so annoyed at the world not listening to us. But then again, you hand the victory to the people that you're opposing, so that's no solution. So there's better ways of doing all of this, and I think the more we can all just calm down, share what we know, and just gently say, look, I think this is amazing, I think that's a better way of doing it.
I found that completely liberating when I come to that realization. It was really liberating. I remember because there's a part from your book actually that I was going to read. And I've got it up here on the screen, right? It says, the main problems, however, the inner demons that began to offset the radiance, were the very tangible crisis of belief and conscience that grew up among certain researchers, and the nagging of the existential angst they felt about what was going on. The real splits in the crop circle community were occurring not in the pubs and magazines, but within enthusiasts' own heads. And so where you've arrived at, where you got to this place, all right, you had a psychic channeling and saying, look, don't try and prove it. So you got some message from the other that was telling you that, this is not the game, right? You're not supposed to be out there trying to convince the world. But like you just said, right, you hear someone stand up and say something, and rather than get angry and react, you think, okay, how can I balance this? That's an inner spiritual change, wouldn't you say, that you've gone through to be able to adopt that position within yourself now? And this initial angst where the real battle was going on, with the inner demons creeping in with the doubt about, are they man-made, are they not, am I going crazy, are the people that are telling me it's all just man-made, that inner battle where, Andy, I have to tell you, right, when I was going through that battle in 1998, after 1997, my first year, and then the winter that came after 1997, then into 1998, this first part of the season, getting over there, I think April, I was over. And then during that summer, bouncing around, having all sorts of angst about, am I crazy? Am I losing it? This is too fantastic. And what happened to me last year was off the charts and so on. I hugged this book when I read it, because you did exactly what you just said. You just laid it out. Here's the issues. Make your own mind up.
Yeah, and yet at the same time, with that book, Vital Signs, I mean, it's not, because I know the danger is you wind up passionless. I'm not advocating blandness here. You stand up for what you believe in, and that book clearly says, this is why I don't think it's a hoax, or all of it. But it acknowledges... A complete
guide to the crop circle mystery and why it is not a hoax.
Now, obviously, how you define hoax is, of course, interesting, and you could have arguments about that. But it makes its point that, in my view, I know it's a long time ago now, but there's something here that there's enough evidence that this is not explained away. Yes, we all know there's man-made formations, but is that the whole story? No. And here's why it's not the whole story. And then, beyond that, you can't force anybody to the table. But, I mean, no, you're right. I mean, you would have known, and you've been through it, and I went through it quite early on. That internal battle you have. What do I believe here? If this is an intervention from beyond this realm, doesn't that really matter? And if somebody is coming along with a plank of wood and making their own rubbish one, isn't that corrupting the code? And you go into this, hang on a minute. But then, I think the ones that did best it were the ones that were able to move beyond that, because then you could go mad with that, and some did. And we know some people would turn to drink and drugs because they just couldn't cope with where it was taking them. The ones that were able to say, okay, you know what, I'm not quite sure what's happening here, so I'm just going to push that a bit there and just enjoy it for what it is and just, again, say what I see. They were the ones that came through and survived. The ones that I think attached a lot of ego to it, and their whole reputations and careers were based on it, and if somebody said it wasn't real, then suddenly all that crumbled. They were the ones that had a lot to lose. And I felt sorry for some people. I'm not saying that with any, being pleased that happened. I was sorry in the way that some people went down. I mean, let's just use an example. Terence Meaden, who was an earlier researcher who thought it was all the weather, struggled, of course, when the formations got more complex. And, he just got to a point where his own belief system couldn't go beyond just basic symmetrical patterns. And then he said, right, it's not the weather, it's all man-made, apart from a few simple ones. The sadness of that was that we then lost his input. And I still think today that actually some of Terence Meaden's observations about the mechanism, just the mechanism of what was laying the plants down, is still valid. And it's such a shame we lost him, because again, it was like he couldn't go there, and his own internal battle, and and then when he got attacked after Doug and Dave did their revelation, all of that, it hurt him, as it hurt lots of people. But to me, I was thinking, no, but it's still valid. What you said was still valid. Why isn't anybody looking at this? Why aren't you even looking at it anymore? But he couldn't do it, and he moved on. So I suppose observing that made me think, I'm not going down that road. I'm going to try and keep my sanity here. And like you say, it's not 5 minutes. It's a long battle. And even now, I'll sometimes think, am I right about that? What if I'm wrong? I don't know. But that's another thing. I advocate that in the book. One little thing anybody should try, right? And I'll lay this out in the new Heretics. Just imagine, just as an exercise, that you're wrong about everything you believe. And when you try and do that, I'll tell you what, the resistance you meet from in here is really strong, or in here. You don't want to go there. You think, no, of course, I must be right, otherwise my whole life's been a sham. But it's really worth going beyond that and just imagining it, but what if I was wrong? What if that person over there were right? Now, that doesn't mean you're going to change your mind, but just to recognise what it would feel like to look in from the outside and from someone that didn't believe you is in itself an education. And then I find I can flip-flop, and then in the end I normally just come back to balance, and where if I have a genuine conviction, I'll wind up, okay, there is something here. No, I was right about that. But it's a really interesting thing. You always challenge what you believe every now and then. Because the thing is, those that can't do that are the ones that usually wind up in the polarization. They dig in their heels, they start screaming at people. Look, we see this in America with Republicans versus Democrats. It's got to such a point where, there's even a film out about an American modern civil war now, imagining that could happen. What a silly, sad situation. Now, I know it's easy for me to say that living here in England, and it's not the same when you're out there. I know that, and, when I was out in America a few weeks ago, you realise it's far more complex than what we see. But nonetheless, when it gets to the point where, a disagreement turns to outright hatred, it's just... So there's no good that comes from that. There can be no good end to that. And, certainly when you're arguing about shapes in the fields, you just don't need to get to that level. You don't need to get to that level. They're beautiful. And even if you want to say they're all man-made, which of course you won't, but, for the people that do, we can put that aside and say, but are they beautiful? Do they inspire? And actually, the general view is, well, actually, yes, they do. Right, there we are. We've all got agreement on one thing then. And so even if you just think it's wonderful art, it is wonderful art. I mean, if you can't see that, you're probably dead artistically. It's wonderful art, and whether it comes from up there, in here, or from somebody with a plank, right? Okay, does it move you? Right, that'll do. To me, there's still a lot that says, but there is more than that going on. But you see the point I'm making. It's just a start. So, okay, well, we can agree on that. Okay, what other things could we agree on? And you go from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's negativity bias, isn't it? And if I remember Michael Glickman, saying once. I had a conversation with him, and I said, if you've got a dozen people, you know, sitting on your deck when doing one of your tea times, and you're looking around their faces as you're discussing and telling them a story about one thing or another that happened to you along your journey with the crop circles, I've noticed that you focus on the person that seems to be the one who's disagreeing with you more than the 95% of the people that are just all sort of there. They're already hanging on your word. You go for the one that you feel you need. And he said, yes, I feel I've got to bring them all along. and there's an element of that in some people, isn't there, where you know, you're just focused on all those. It's like the 1% of things. Someone will listen to what you say and go, I agree with 99% of what you just said, but this 1%, I want to fight you with that, and forget all the stuff that they agree with you on.
Yeah, I mean, Michael
strange,
Glickman, I mean, of course he thrived on the combat. So, and to be fair here, I mean, there was an entertainment value to that. And, you know, Michael wrote for our magazine, Sussex Circular, and, you know, had a lot of very interesting debates with Michael. But yeah, getting him into that fiery state. Now, for him, it was funny, and that drove him. And weirdly, I kind of felt it was all right for him to do that. That was his raison d'etre in a way. But other people, it would eat them up too much. And the thing was, Michael also had a sense of humour. And in the next, he could be really angry. In the next breath, there'd be a little twinkle in the eye and a laugh, you know. And that somehow made it all right. There were some people who couldn't cope with him at all, of course, but they missed the point. That as much as anything, he would often play devil's advocate, I think, and he would choose to latch onto a point and choose to fight that point. What he really believed, he didn't always know, but he was almost testing you to see, well, how are you going to react to him reacting so fiercely. And you know, the ones that learned that, it just enjoyed it and got along with it. Some couldn't, and absolutely couldn't stand the man. But you know, I don't think in his case he was. Yes, I think he did get very angry about certain things, but I don't think that it was anything other than that's the way he was about everything. But there were other researchers that it did turn nasty, and it got nasty, and you could feel this blackness around them. That in the end, it just wasn't nice to be around. But with Michael, it wasn't like that, you know.
No, it was his sense of humour, the warmth he could radiate when he had a group there, and how he could make people, you know, fall in love with him, and he just had this charm, didn't he? He had that. I think, you know, his background with Ronnie Scott's and the people he's hung out with in his life, he just had, you know, even with his disability towards the end, he still had that sparkle that could make people sort of swoon at him. It was a star. This episode that we're doing now, I'm planning to launch it on the 1st of May, actually, this episode, and that would be the anniversary of his death, of his passing, Michael. And so, good tribute actually to talk about him, actually, because he's been a big star, isn't he, in the whole crop circle world.
Definitely. And the thing is that Michael, he stood up for what he believed in, and he put it out there. And, you know, you can agree with him, you can disagree with him, but you cannot fault him for having a passion. And he never let go of that, you know, and he was an example to people. But he didn't just rant. You could also read about the incredible geometrical work that he did. He would point out stuff about mathematics. Now, you know, he wasn't just there to be a ranter. He actually would share things that were, you know, really genuinely meaningful and fascinating that anybody could see. So it was all backed up with genuine knowledge. I found it fascinating that when he did die, his old friend Mike Lee, film director, who, you know, always was fascinated by Michael's fascination with the crop circles, whatever Mike Lee himself thought, he wrote a really good tribute in one of the newspapers and saying, look, this man deserved a lot more attention than perhaps he had in his lifetime. And then you read this stupid comments from underneath from people who knew nothing about crop circles. Oh no, it's all man-made. He must have been a moron. And you think, you are the morons, mate. Right? You're not understanding anything about the level of understanding this man had. You know. But what that showed was just, the weakness of most people's knowledge and debate. They will voice an opinion on something that I find 9 times out of 10 they have no knowledge about at all, especially in the alternative realms. And that's what annoys me. Look, if somebody wants to debunk and have an argument with me about something that I think's meaningful, fine, if you're informed. Get informed, then we can do that. If you're not informed, it's an utter waste of everybody's time. But I'm afraid that's probably more the way it is with most people. And again, because we're forced to react by everything, and we'll have a 10th-hand opinion that the media fed us. And if we never stop to think about it, we might think that's a truth, but it's not a truth. It's just a 10th-hand opinion that could have been wrong in the first place. And that really, well, on one level, it really annoyed me when I saw that underneath the tribute to Michael. But on the other hand, I thought, well, there you go, Michael. It just proves the point, doesn't it? You know, you've always said, you know, you don't have to like what I say, and even at his death, people didn't like what he had to say, but it was still brilliant that the tribute was out there. And yeah, well done to Mike Lee for daring to do it, because Mike himself, you know, has had a little bit of criticism. Well, you don't believe this, do you? And he stood up for it, saying, look, Michael was my friend. If Michael believes in it, there's got to be something to it. And I think that's how a lot of people who knew Michael felt.
I had several conversations with Mike Lee around at Michael's house. I first met him in 2007, actually. Very smart guy, obviously. The way that he's, you know, gone about producing his films, this innovative approach and bringing out the creativity in people. He's a gifted man and a smart guy and lifelong friend with Michael. And you know, he wasn't one of these guys that just believed it because his mate believed it. He was a smart enough guy to look at what Michael showed him and go, yeah, there's definitely something there. And he had to be careful, obviously, with his profile. But yeah, as you say, he had said in the past, there's something going on here, and you know, the press had done the usual thing.
Well, he wasn't that careful, of course.
Jansen, actually.
He wasn't that careful, of course, because he did actually write it forward to my Vital Signs Crop Circle book, so he was willing to put his name to that as well. So bless him. Yeah, bless Michael.
Yeah.
Michael and Mike Lee.
Yeah, bless him.
You know, they stood their ground and said, hey, this is what we're interested in. Take it or leave it. Brilliant.
Yeah. It made me think of what Bert Jansen said to me years ago about when people say these things, it shows you more about them than it does about the phenomenon, because they can't possibly know anything about the phenomenon that they've never been involved in. So just calling somebody names or, you know, an ad hominem kind of just says more about them. And I've even said to people over the years, you know, because you get that quippy response, don't you? Oh, it's, you know, it's all man-made or whatever, and they want to sort of say something. You go, it wouldn't be fair to have a conversation with you. You've never been in one, you know. And if I ask them, what do you do for a living? And they say they're a plumber or an electrician. I say, look, I know nothing about that. I've never actually ever wired a plug, or I've never done it, you know, put any pipes together. If I started to tell you now how to do that, what would you think of me? And sometimes I've made people sort of think, you know, oh, maybe, actually, that would be stupid. Why would I listen to somebody tell me about what I know? You know, I've got so much experience in, but, you know, that's just one of those interesting things you see about people, isn't it, along the way?
It is. But you know what? This might be shifting. Oh, have we got to finish? Well, in brief, I was just going to say.
No, we haven't got to finish.
Oh, right,
Go on as long as you want.
Well, I was just going to say, in the last 2 or 3 years, because of all the UAP, UFO coverage, and it getting to Congress and all of that, it's funny, people are now beginning to look again at other things that have been associated with UFOs. There's been a couple of crop circle things that have gone out online in kind of quite sort of, youthful kind of broadcasts and stuff that have had a hell of a lot of views. I find that really interesting because, you know, the mainstream media would have us believe no one's interested in crop circles, nobody cares about crop circles. Well, clearly they do, because people are putting stuff out there, rediscovering it, saying, wow, look at this. New people are coming to it. They don't know anything about the history of research at all, which on one level is sad, but equally they're coming in going, well, this is amazing. Why are we not talking about this? So maybe there is a rediscovery, and now people are going to lose the baggage and come to it with a kind of fresh eye. So it might be changing, and we may find that actually, you know, when they do acknowledge, look, there is a UAP phenomenon or whatever, people are going to reevaluate crop circles as well.
I'm with you on that one, mate. That's one of the reasons that I got this podcast together, was to, you know, I have a feeling that, you know, even if we're wrong with that what we broadcast here now, even if it isn't picked up for 5 years or 6 or 7 or 10 years or 15 years, what we're going to talk about now and what we've been talking about, people will pick up on at some point, because I really do think that there will be a revisiting of the crop circles, because it's just too amazing not to have a good look at, isn't it? And the generations that are coming through are different. They don't go on mainstream. They live on online, don't they, with their news and their outlets.
Well, that is becoming the mainstream.
It is, yeah. Actually, Joe Rogan said that in he did a great interview with Tucker Carlson last night, which was Tucker Carlson's been someone over the years that I've been a bit dubious about, but some of the stuff he's sort of put out there lately, and some of the ways he seems to be standing up for truth on some issues, is been a bit of a surprise to me. What do you think?
I was listening actually to some of the Tucker Carlson interview today, actually. So obviously, the danger with Tucker Carlson getting involved with our kind of realms is because not everybody likes him and they think that he's put out false information, blah, blah, might then think, well, it just goes to show what a lot of old rubbish it is. But equally, he's going to bring with him a lot of people that will be new to this, who, because he is now involved, will think, well, hang on, maybe there is something to it. So I imagine it will divide people. But no, I agree with this. Some of what he said, and I don't agree with all of Tucker Carlson's views, but some of what he said was actually very sensible. And again, look, it should be talked about. Again, you don't have to agree with absolutely everything somebody over there says to be able to identify things that they were right about. Say, yeah, but this was good, and I really agree with that, That's the thing. It doesn't have to be either or. And so, yeah, it may well be some good will come out of what Tucker Carlson is trying to do at the moment. He's perhaps an unexpected addition to the alternative world. But, it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, I think what you just said actually probably is the way forward, though, isn't it? Is where we can tolerate listening to somebody, not saying, oh, look, if they're associated with it, then the subject they're putting forward must be false, because that's baby in the bathwater, isn't it? You've got to examine the actual issue, but also, if they say stuff that we don't agree with, we should be intelligent enough to pick out the bits that we can resonate with. We don't have to throw everything away. I think that's the way forward. Exactly. That we've got to treat where we get information from, isn't it?
It's so simple. It's not hard to do it. It's just that we've all got used to not doing it. And we've all got used to being a 1 or a 0, or it's black or it's white, or it's yes or it's no. Well, it isn't. Nothing's like that. The universe doesn't work like that. I'm afraid it's the grey areas, it's the nuance in the middle where most answers are to be found. And the sooner we stop judging somebody just because we don't like one of their views, and judging them as therefore being a completely evil person, the better it will be. We can also say, perhaps, and be more sensible, but yeah, okay, this bit's interesting, and maybe he's not wrong about everything, or she. That's a better way to be. And let's come out of the either or world, because I think that's what's led to so many of the divides. And then, the world's about to change. One day we'll have a proper conversation about AI, because I've been trying to raise awareness of that in our kind of realms. I don't think we've taken it seriously enough. The technology is now being programmed that's going to take over, and it's not even going to be human beings directing many things before too long. So we'd better make damn sure that what that stuff is programmed with actually is more sensible than the way we deal with things now. Because if we go in programming the AI with the way we're dealing with things now, right, it's all over for sure.
Well, I mean, I was just going to finish on that, Andy. If you've got time to carry on with it for a minute, I wanted to talk to you about it, because it was when I was working in Mexico, I was saying to Jaime, why aren't we covering AI? Let me do a piece on AI. And he's going, what are you on about AI? And I was like, so that I even got a voice synthesizer and was taking the scripts that they were producing in Spanish, feeding them into an AI voice synthesizer and having complete narration. And I fooled the head producer with the voice. She thought I'd hired a woman to do the translation of my script, and it was an AI. And that was 3 years ago. Now we know where we are with voice synthesis. And I was saying to him then, this is just the beginning. Believe me, this is going to go big. And I was talking to him about the military applications and all of the things. And I think I talked to you about Aladdin, this AI that's been used in risk management with BlackRock and State Street and these big asset managers. Now they're using AI to make their, trades or whatever it is they do. Three things. You talk about programming. They're not programmed, are they? They've been given a set of parameters under which now the system is able to learn for itself. So it's already read the sum total of human knowledge. I watched a podcast that was, I think, 8 months old, where one of the ex-Google engineers who worked on AI said it's at about 155 IQ now, and he forecasts that we're looking at it being an IQ of 1600 or thereabouts by 25. So it's no longer programmed by us to get to where it's going to go with intelligence. What does that mean for the rest of us? I mean, it's not just about jobs, is it? I mean, because that whole debate about what meaning we're going to derive from our lives without work, without going to the supermarket and moving things in front of a little barcode machine that go beep so we can get our money to pay our rent. I don't know why people would want to hang on to those kinds of jobs. Anyway, I know you've got to have them to pay your bills because that's the system we live in now. But given the choice, I think most people wouldn't want to do that. They would want to do something more creative with their lives.
So
how do you see all this playing out? It's such a big topic.
It's massive. So last year at the Glastonbury Symposium, which you've been kind enough to speak at in years past, I gave a talk about AI. Because I realise that a lot of people there, they haven't taken it seriously. And only the last couple of years has it really sunk in what's going on. And you can watch it. Go to my website, truthagenda.org, and just look at the videos page and you can watch it.
No, I watched it. I was there.
You were there. And I did crop circle poetry just from a standard AI machine, got it to produce beautiful artwork, just as very, very simple demonstrations to people of this is what it can do. And as you say, it's been doing other stuff for quite a while. And then the fact that it can reproduce voices and music and basically write very good articles, or better than some people could write, and translate things, and actually it can do an awful lot of stuff. You then quickly realise, the world is about to turn upside down. It will almost certainly take away the vast majority of jobs in the long run. Now, I know the way they sell it, it's going to create new employment. Well, yeah, for a little while, for a very certain few people. But for the kind of people that just lost their work, as a bus conductor or whatever, no, they will not suddenly be doing work with AI because that's not their skill. Most people, I think, within 20 years are going to struggle to get a job. Now, that means the whole economy and the way that it works is going to have to be completely reevaluated. And the sad thing is, I don't see any joined-up thinking here at all. No one's ready for that to happen, but it will happen, because in the end, the companies will just say, hang on, why am I paying someone to do this, when actually we can just get AI to do it for effectively nothing. And already, call centres are being laid off. An AI voice apparently is almost as good now as just talking to a human being, maybe better. They're writing a lot of articles now in journals and in papers where you just got to basically put the basic facts together in a reasonable way. So journalists are going to be laid off soon. Whole books, no doubt, in fact I think they already are being written by AI, so that's authors off. So I won't be writing any more books for much longer, I would have thought. Because who is going to pay people to do these things when we know the way companies think? Even if it's not quite as good, they'll go, hey, this is great, we're not having to pay anyone. So that's just the first stage. Then AI's calculation powers, especially when quantum computers get going properly, where you can actually calculate incredibly quickly, and we can't go into the technicality of that today. You've then got a whole other thing where you could create cyber attacks just any day you want. You could create a new virus in your house. You will be able to decrypt virtually anything. So the age of privacy online is over, because encrypting something right, is something we've all relied on. But when you've got calculation power that can just easily unencrypt it, within seconds, then what? Maybe somebody will come up with a solution to this, but this is all heading towards us. A very good book that I would recommend, by the way, to anybody concerned about this, is by a guy called Mustafa Suleiman. And his book, The Coming Wave, is crucial reading. So he's been at the forefront of creating AI, and he's one of those that suddenly realised what it's going to do to society. And when it gets, well, it already is there, when the military-industrial complex starts to use it to the full, we're all in great danger. Now, he's not saying there's no wonderful gifts that come with it. He's saying there absolutely is. That's why he's been working on it. But he's now realised what it is about to do to us. And if we don't find some way to streamline it, to contain it, so that bad actors don't get hold of this and do terrible things with it, the world is going to be undergoing a lot of catastrophes. And it's very enlightening reading. Now, he is an optimist. And he puts forward, happily, ways we could avoid the worst-case scenario. But he's very realistic also, and I think, I'd already come to the conclusion that he had, even before I read his book. So I've only read his book since I gave that talk at last year's Glastonbury Symposium, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, this is absolutely where it's going, isn't it? It doesn't take much to project where it's going to go, and yet still I think a lot of us got our heads in the sand. We still think it's going to all continue the way that it has been for years. I don't think it will. And I don't think there's a disconnection with the whole UAP, ET disclosure revelations, because some have even argued they are a kind of biological AI, the greys and all of that. That's been a thought for a little while, that actually they know what happens when a society gets to where we're at, and maybe that's why they're here now, either to clean up the mess or to warn us or to just watch the fun, because they know what happens when you get AI on this level. Anybody that thinks the world's going to be the same in even 10 years' time to what it is even now, in my view, is making a big mistake. It's about to turn everything upside down. So, interesting times lay ahead. And what I find fascinating about the whole crop circle phenomenon is it brought many of us to thinking they were a herald of some kind of change. Remember? Everybody used to say that. This is they're calling people to wake them up to some kind of new world. Well, maybe here we are. And now we're at the very beginning of that. We all perhaps thought it would be some marvellous, beautiful ascension. Well, it might yet be, but it means there's going to be hard work to do, and we're going to have to sort out a lot of issues. And now I think they're really upon us. And I think that the name of that guy's book, The Coming Wave, I can't think of a better term for it. There's a massive wave about to break on us from all directions. And we're going to have to be strong. We're going to have to be canny and not be wavered and pushed over by all the agendas, but we're going to have to, really hold our own and keep our sanity throughout this, because I think the next few decades are going to be like nothing we've ever seen. Nothing.
I'm with you on that. I mean, from a jobs point of view, right? I remember David Graeber's book, Bullshit Jobs, where he interviewed lots of people and said, like Ken Robinson said, if you could give up your job today, would you do it? And so many people would, except artists or people that worked in the arts or the humanities, because if you suggested to them that you give up what you do, they said it's who they are. They identified as the role that they played in the world, right? But most other people who, did manual jobs or whatever and were, doing the right thing, bringing food home, feeding their families and so on, if they had a choice, would give it up. Others like their work, and that's perfectly fine too. If you're making your contribution or whatever, you're doing what you do, doing what you like, that's perfectly great. So the big threat, first of all, about having your jobs taken away from you from AI, in some ways, that could be a positive thing, to get people to reevaluate what the goals are in life, because it has essentially over the last 100 years since we've entered this massive capitalist, materialist kind of worldview, that the pursuit of human beings is to acquire property, have status, etc., etc., etc. When there's other people who say, well, maybe there are other pursuits in life, the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of physical fitness or art or music or whatever. So in some ways I see that, you know, the positive things of what AI could do by taking away certain jobs that could free up people to do other things. And then I originally embraced the whole Rutger Bregman ideas about a universal basic income and so on, right? I thought, oh, well, that'll be the way. You know, if you get enough to pay, you know, live on, and everything gets regulated, then, you know, your AI is taking care of so much of the things that we don't have to worry about anymore. And then, you know, we can live our lives pursuing the things we want to pursue in some ways. But then I saw that could be a trap, because the central bank digital currency that the universal basic income will be paid through would be conditional upon you not moving at 15 minutes outside of your area, or not going on an aeroplane, or eating, you know, food that's prepared for you from processed factories that are owned by big corporations and so on and so forth, that are also run by AI like Amazon and so on. So there are all these dystopian kind of ways that it could be hoist upon us. Rather than it liberating us as human beings, it's going to be used to do a Terminator number on us, or an Elysium number where you've got the elites living in some kind of, you know.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, obviously, the Terminator scenario is the very worst case scenario. But no, you're right.
Of course.
I think that a lot.
But then, have you seen Boston Dynamics Robot this week?
Well, I know.
Have you seen Boston Dynamics Robot this week? Yeah.
We are creating a world that, of course, could go in that direction. But even before we get to that direction, the thing is, for so many centuries, though, human beings have been defined by their roles, and especially by work. And it's all lovely to think, well, we'll just sit there and I'll paint and I'll do music and that. How many people are going to do that for that long? And then when they can see that actually AI is doing it better than they can probably do, you kind of you lose the motivation. Well, there's a truth to this. I mean, already you look at some of the artwork it's producing. I'm not saying it's there yet, but, you know, give it a few more years and you think, well, I can't even do that well, so why would I bother to do something that's not as good as that? And so you've got that aspect. I think we will lose, or we risk, not everyone, but we will risk losing something very crucial that's always driven us. And then I think we could feel very all at sea with that. What did we do? We'll lose motivation. I think a lot of people will retreat to virtual worlds. I mean, virtual reality becomes like even better than it is now. And already a lot of people spend a lot of their life gaming. I think we're just going to get lost in either kind of just sort of entertainment pursuits or hedonism, because we're not going to know what else to do. But the thing is, when they talk about universal income, they're nowhere near ready to bring that in, right? Okay, I know COVID was seen as a test. How's the economy going to support that? We're now saying that, like, you know, Britain as an example is effectively bankrupt because of what happened with COVID. So how's that going to change over smoothly to, oh yeah, right, here's some money for doing nothing, and then before you know it, the economy probably would collapse. Then it will come out in a kind of a great reset sort of thing that you've suggested there, where you're all in tiny little boxes, very heavily controlled by a world that is governed by incredible techniques of surveillance, which AI, of course, are giving absolute carte blanche to do. It's giving just about every control that you could have ever dreamt of. Orwell couldn't have dreamt of where China's already gone. And that will be rolled out across the world to try to contain AI getting out to other people that could then challenge the authorities that want to use it their own way. So there's all these dilemmas. It's very complex. It's not straightforward. But yeah, I know they try to sell it that you're not going to be happy because you won't have any work to do. But for a lot of people, that's like pulling the plug on them. And what are you going to do? Except, and I talked about this in my talk, except what it might enable us to do is to get back to what's really in here. Will AI ever have a spirit? Will it ever be psychic? Maybe, maybe not. And maybe that's where we begin a whole new evolution to say, right, everything else has been done. But you know what? Pursuit of the spirit, pursuit of where we could evolve to be, perhaps beyond the physical world, maybe that's what we'll start to work on more. And maybe it will open a door to us actually going to a whole other level that all the tech and all the AI can't do. So that is something that in my talk I talk about. Maybe it'll open a door. And here's another thing. The AI won't be all bad. already people are saying they're setting AI up to look at patterns in, say, astrology or ufology, and they're saying, quickly calculate what are the odds of all this being rubbish and what are the odds of it being perhaps something worth looking at. And they're actually coming back with really fascinating findings. And somebody put in recently...
Oh, really?
You got AI to look at all the moon landing photographs saying, is this real or is it in a studio? And it came up almost instantly, no, it's obviously in a studio. Now, I'm not saying that it was right. I don't know how that was programmed. But that's the kind of way it's going. And it might start looking at conspiracy things. It might start looking at crop circles and concluding, no, actually, there is something here. But it will depend on what parameters it's programmed with. So that will only be the case if it's allowed to look at everything and it's truly fair and it isn't biased. And the trouble we've got at the moment is a lot of the AI will be heavily censored and heavily biased. But if we can get over that, it might actually make some really amazing discoveries that might help us. So, yeah, look, it's like anything. It brings good and bad.
It's one of those classic race to the bottom scenarios. If we stop doing it, then China are going to carry on. That gives them an advantage, so we have to carry on. So we're already in that race to the bottom with wherever it's going to take us.
Well, the only way that you could contain it would be for the whole world to absolutely agree on certain protocols, and that, as you say, is the problem, because as we know, getting the whole world to agree to anything is extremely difficult, and that is why it may well be that we wind up in a bad scenario. However, we don't know. There might be things that come out of this that may be more positive than we think, but certainly the one thing that is unavoidable, it will be absolutely different to what we've been through before. It will turn absolutely every single thing upside down. And eventually we hope that maybe we'll all survive and get through, and then we'll use the best of it. But, anybody thinking this won't affect them, I'm afraid they're wrong. And somebody said to me, a lovely person, a new agey sort of person said to me, well, yeah, but this won't affect us because we're above all that. You're not. It's going to come after you, right? Anybody who thinks you're above AI affecting you, no, you don't have to bring it personally into your life, but it's already running your life. You alluded to this earlier. Already the stock markets, it's run by AI. It's not people making funny hand signs across the stock exchange floor anymore. It's been done in milliseconds by programs. It's been like this for a while. It's already running your life. It's affecting everything. So we just need to wake up to it and be aware of it, so that, look, as we go forward into the future with whatever it brings, at least we're meeting it face to face. So this kind of sticking our heads in the sand, I don't think that's going to help us in the long run. Let's just be real. It's changing, so let's try and make it the best change that we can. And as I said, we've been talking for so long about coming changes, earth changes, ascension, or whatever it might be. Well, okay, did you think that would be a free lunch? That you wouldn't have to do anything, or that it would all be easy peasy? No, probably not. And now we're meeting the reality that it will bring dreams and it will bring nightmares all at the same time. But you know what? Somehow, somewhere, we might be able to cut our way through this. But if you go in with the attitude that you won't, well, you might as well give up now. We don't know. There could be incredible things that come from this.
Would you say, I think, for me, watching the way the world's gone, because I had some kind of premonitions when I first got involved in the crop circles. There were a couple about computers, and one of them was about computers and where it would go in the future. I had some notion that, I remember saying to my teacher, do you think one day that they'll try and put consciousness of somebody inside a computer? And I remember him saying in his American accent, well, that sounds a bit new agey, guy. And then you're looking at Musk with his implant and talking about general artificial intelligence and quantum computing, and that now from 1997 to 2024. Now, what I was sort of thinking or asking questions about back then, now what doesn't seem so wacky. And the other thing was about the UFO subject. My intuition at the time was that in the future, the governments are going to say that there's something to this, but there's going to be lots of lies attached to it. And I think we're going through that right now. I think there's for the threads of true stories that are out there with the UFOs, there's a bunch of smoke and mirrors being thrown around as well for whatever reason. I think we're there with that. How all this has been for me to sort of watch and ground over the years, I can honestly say to you now, Andy, that the crop circles have helped me keep my feet on the ground rather than. Because through all of these changes in politics and watching the way humanity's going and watching us, for example, what's going on in Israel and what's going on in Russia and Ukraine and the tensions in China and potentially World War III, and AI is going to come and get us, and wherever you turn at the moment, a pandemic's going to get us and AI is going to get us, the war's going to get us. The crop circles have been something for me where I've just gone, that's kept me sane. I think if I knew all of this other stuff and I didn't know that the crop circles in my heart were something other, I think I would have had a bigger struggle with all of the news that we've got going on around us now. Do you feel the same as that?
Well, I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today without having had the crop circles in my life. And I think that they sent a lot of people off on a lot of paths, as I say in the new Heretics book, that maybe you didn't understand quite why you were winding up on that path, but now this is perhaps where it starts to come together. That perhaps they were indeed triggering people, and it didn't even in a way matter what conclusion you came to about the circles. It's what it did to you. It's what it changed inside you, and it made us all think, and it made us look at the wider world, and it made us wonder, where are we all going? And it opened doors to all of that. So, yeah, there's that aspect, but the other aspect is, with all the madness going on and all the darkness out there, you've got this beautiful radiance, these wonderful patterns just still welling up, almost as a balance to that. It's like, yeah, there's all that going on, it's madness, but look at this. And there's still beauty, and there's still this feeling of centeredness about it. And to me, that's good enough reason for them to be there. And I agree with you. Yeah, it makes me feel happy. And when I see the latest formation, I've kind of gone beyond caring where it comes from. As I said earlier, does this speak to me in any way? And fine, if it does, it does. And like the one last year, the sunflower formation, which appeared, there was something about it that just was so beautiful. I thought, you know what? I could just look at that all day, and it's like a mandala. It's like it does something. It's just, there was something about it. There was just, whilst I was looking at that, I just forgot about all the other stuff going on. And I think that's the thing. They bring you to a place of simplicity. It's like a meditation, or you just have a candle in front of you. They just bring you back to that, and only that. And just for a while you're in that mode, nothing else, it matters. And yet, it's not unconnected to it. In the end, it will spin you off out. You can't stay there forever. You have to spin off out and use what you learn. But I think that's what we're doing. And I think there's other phenomena that have done that too, whether it be UFOs or getting into investigating psychic phenomena or whatever it may be. Often people have begun with something, but it's then taken them out to something wider, and it becomes useful in a wider context. And I'd like to think all the gifts that we've gained from the crop circles over the years, all that learning, will in the end be helpful to the world. Well, I think it already is, clearly. I think that's shown itself to be the case, and therefore it was all worthwhile. And therefore, we should be respectful about this phenomenon and try to show other people why they should be respectful about it, whatever they think's going on. And if we can just achieve that, I think we will have achieved something.
Yeah, I think that's as I've said to you before, phenomena B, this the way that we've responded to it. Put aside for a moment, who's making them, where they come from, whatever. How we react to it, what it tells us about ourselves, what it tells us about culture. That's the journey that you and I have been on with this, and we've been through our own transformations over the years with how it's opened our eyes to certain things, and also how we react and how we respond to news and outside events, and also internal events has changed. And so for me, these conversations in these podcasts will always seem to end up coming back to the human condition and what it is to be human amidst all of this crazy stuff, and having a good chat about that. I think that's where I see this podcast going.
And that's very important now, when what it is to be human is about to be challenged. And you mentioned Elon Musk and brain chips.
Yeah.
Transhumanism will change us. We will, and there's no getting around it. We are already adopting technology into our bodies. When the AI is interacting and we're becoming the AI, again, we need to be very, very careful that we protect something vital there. Otherwise, you wind up as the Cybermen or the Borg. You don't want to lose that essence, and that would be a big dilemma. Some will go headlong into it, say, "Great, I don't mind being a robot," but these will be genuine dilemmas. I know it sounds like mad sci-fi, but it's coming around the corner really quickly. And yeah, when they can insert a brain chip, when you can see what we today call the internet just in your head, it'll come. Then what? Because who's controlling that? Is it a freeway?
Right.
And is that bypassing the inner essence of who you really are? These are going to be big things. Not everybody will do it. There'll always be communities that will reject their AI. They will go their own sweet way with it. But because we know history, most will just go along with it. Because in the end, it will be either hard to avoid, or the benefits will seem nice enough that you think, "Oh, I'll give it a go," But it will change us. So, yeah, what it is to be human today will not necessarily be the same as what it is in 100 years' time. And it's so
Definitely.
exponential,
Well,
it's
less
so
than that, I
rapid,
think.
or less. I'm being generous there. It's going to throw up big dilemmas, but also big choices about what we want to be. And maybe the future of humanity is AI. You know what I mean? Now, I don't want it to be necessarily, but maybe when we do get biological technology, and that becomes the way we don't build things with nails and nuts and bolts. It's grown, which they're already experimenting with. Maybe eventually we just blend so much you can't tell the difference. I don't want that to be the case here and now, but it may well have already happened in several civilizations. Hence, we were saying some believe the Greys are exactly that. They're biological AI. So, in which case, we can already see where that can take you. And people who've claimed to have met the Greys have often said there's something cold, there's something missing. But, maybe that's just because it's so different to what we are. But, if we then find ourselves on the same road, we might one day discover how they got to be that way. But again, not everyone will do that, so you might get a divergence, different species. We'll see. But yeah, what it is to be human, that's going to be the crucial lesson, the journey of all of this.
It really is. It really is. Gary Nolan talked about. Have you heard this? Basal ganglia, and there's some other part of the brain that some people who are open to UFO. Okay, so he's found that these people that have been exposed to these, whatever they are, UAPs, and people that have had contact with them, let's say psychic contact, or they've had these impressions, or whatever other sort of, in the range of things that can happen to people with these sorts of contacts, that they have different brains. And his studies have shown that not only do they have different parts of their brains that are activated, that they've sought out partners unconsciously who've also got the same sort of brain structure, and they've had children that have got this brain structure. So he's making a correlation between people that are having experiences with this UAP phenomena and being of a different physical neurological structure.
So again, that could be the beginning of a divergence, and again comes back to that idea, which a lot of people are beginning to talk about now, which is that's why they are here now. They see where we're going to go, but they're trying to introduce something that will take a certain strand onwards and be able to survive, what perhaps we might not all survive, and it's no accident. So it does seem like the first nuclear test did seem to bring this spate of UFO activity and something, well, that's what alerted them. But then they probably know, once you get nuclear power, it's not that long before you get to computing power and AI, so they just watch and wait. They know the curve, because probably many other civilizations have done it. And you look up in the night sky, and you have got that weird Fermi's paradox thing of, we don't seem, unless they're just all being covered up, and that is still a suggestion, but there don't seem to be a lot of signals coming from anywhere. So either when we get to a level when you get this kind of technology, we don't survive, or the ones that do survive become something else. And they're not even existing on a level where you'd be putting out signals like that. We're looking in the wrong place. Maybe life, it diverges. It either destroys itself or it goes to some other level that we don't recognize here in this physical plane. But maybe that'll be the future for some of us. So, yeah, it could well be that we just splinter into lots of different pathways. But I really would like to think that we could actually, for once, use some common sense and strike a balance. Is that too much to hope for? Maybe, but I'm still going to pray that maybe we all go, okay, all right, let's work together to make this the best experience it can be rather than the worst. But all the time money and power is directing it, and that's where we're at the moment. That's your problem. We've got to move beyond that and find a better way.
There's the issue of free will, isn't there? When you talk about they're watching us or whatever it is. I mean, I've had these two struggles. So Tucker Carlson, the interview we talked about earlier, talking to Joe Rogan, he says it's a spiritual phenomenon. The UFO phenomenon is a spiritual phenomenon. It's been around for years. Paranormal things have been happening, and it just so happens that when we detonated a nuclear bomb, whatever it is changed its face into a technological thing, because we can all relate to that. Back in the day, it was Chupacabra in Mexico, or it was, the burning bush for Moses or whatever, but it's always been here. It's a spiritual thing. And in some respects, aspects that resonates because of so many shamanic cultures that talk about spirits of the ancestors and spirits of the gods, and and the various other things that humanity has related to over the years, the Egyptians and so on. And then you've got this UFO phenomenon where craft has been recovered, where material, physical thing, the greys have been, witnessed by lots of people. And you go, hang on, there might be that they're sort of automatons that are AI controlled, and they're a mixture of sort of the Terminator stuff, the biology in that. We don't know. There's all that speculation. We haven't seen that stuff yet. We got to talk about materials or elements. There's the element that Bob Lazar talked about, isn't there, that subsequently turned out to be a real element. So I struggle with some aspects of the physical alien UFO presence, and then this spiritual thing that could be present here on Earth, or a combination of both. And then if the aliens are here, which obviously, with the evidence that's around now, that we know that something's here, but they're only interfering, as we've seen, with nuclear installations or the military industrial complexes they have done, or came about more seriously after we started letting off nuclear bombs. Have they got some parameters where they don't? Because free will to me means we have to have the ability to destroy ourselves. So they're not interfering like a prime directive kind of thing, where they're landing on the White House lawn and saying, you want to drop all these bombs and get rid of this AI because you'll only end up where we ended up. They're flying around, creating pretty patterns in fields. 60, 70 years, humanity's had a struggle trying to get the government to admit that they've had something else going on, but now they are. But we're not much further forward down the road, really. And yet we've got this phenomena going on, okay? So can they step in at some point if we're about to destroy ourselves? How much can they help us? If they're interfering with nuclear weapons and nuclear installations, they can interfere to a certain extent, it seems, with the path of humanity. How do you reconcile all of those different things?
It is interesting, isn't it?
Crazy.
Yeah, I think about it a lot. It's interesting, though, how the UFO world has, just in the last few years, moved towards this realization that it isn't just physical nuts and bolts. There's clearly some level of physical presence, but we believe that we exist on more than one plane. I think they've come round to the realization that, okay, there's other levels of existence here. that are not necessarily in that physical sense that we know alien life to be or whatever, and that they move between the two. If you look at some of the more convincing footage of UFOs, the way they're suddenly just twang clearly into some other reality, they've gone somewhere else in the blink of an eye. And it's probably not so much that they're even moving distance-wise, that they're moving into just another reality that's obviously perfectly normal for them. And we talk about portals, and there's the whole Skinwalker Ranch stuff, things seem to come and go from other dimensions. There are certain places that where it's a lot easier for that to happen. So, yeah, I think that it's all of this. I think it's all coming together, and it's far more than just physical. And I think that that's where we're seeing some level of advancement here. When we started to deal with the atomic power, obviously that's quite a physical thing, but we don't know what that's doing on other dimensional levels. And, it may well be that's how they spotted it, is that they picked up ripples on some whole other level. Will they intervene if we try and do something really stupid? I don't know. I mean, I know one very famous, and I won't name him, but a UFO experiencer stroke researcher who says that he's been told they will not intervene. Now that kind of worried some people, because you think maybe we need them to intervene. But equally, do we want to give our power on a plate to some other level of reality? We don't know what it is. Because I think if it were announced tomorrow that the aliens were here, you're going to get a mixture. Some people will nod sagely, others will feel very afraid and terrified, and others will worship them and see them as the new godlike force because they're so above us. And whether any of those approaches is entirely correct, I don't know. Until you know what you're dealing with and whether you can trust it, do you want to give all your power away to, something out there? And that, I think, is another reason why the powers that be are probably very reluctant to acknowledge that there is something out there that can shut down nuclear bases or whatever, because you're basically saying you're not the authority. And the day that we stop believing in our states and governments as the authority and think, well, there's something above them, you're going to get chaos. Because we're not going to look to them. We're going to start hoping that there will be intervention from beyond. But whether that's a forlorn hope or even a good hope to have, I don't know. Because it diminishes us on some level. But maybe, on the other hand, that's the lesson we have to learn, that we're not the be-all and end-all of life. And that there are things out there that maybe are more powerful, you'd like to hope more wise, that we have to listen to. But we don't know. These are all therefore unknowns. But yeah, I think where we're heading with all of this is a general acknowledgement of intelligence that is from elsewhere, not just little green men in flying saucers, even though that may be a part of it, although they're generally grey men. But, that it's something a lot more, and that the implications of this, and I think this is what we're beginning to hear more and more now from people like the Soul Foundation, are so much bigger than we thought. And it's going to affect us so much more deeply than we thought. And the fact that that's all happening now, and this realization that we're about to transform our own civilization with our own technology, is big. And it's all coming together. And that's why I think there's a big culture shock coming, whichever way it happens. And I don't think we're going to avoid it. But we might survive it.
And I suppose, that's it, isn't it? I mean, there are going to be some casualties. We are in for big changes. There's no question about that. Just on the basis of, the regular news and the way the world events are going, without bringing in the UFOs and the crop circles and the paranormal elements to, what could potentially give us answers to what it is to be human, or some answers, or some idea of where we might go in the future as a result of that knowledge. But what is interesting, I suppose, and this is probably a good way to end our almost 2-hour discussion now, Andy, is because people like Gary Nolan, and because the academics that he's involved with are now all open and feeling that they have license to have conversations about this and speculate, as we've been doing mostly for the last couple of hours, it's we don't feel like dissidents so much anymore. There's still lots of people that, you know, aren't aware of what's going on, and they don't really realise, you know, I speak to people on a daily basis who don't really know what's going on with the Congress and the recent releases and so on, and so they still think it's all wacko stuff. But more and more people are feeling that they have license to be able to talk about this now, without feeling that they're cranky, and that can only be a good thing.
I think so, and I think we are moving beyond that, and we tend to still look to the mainstream media in the old sense as to that is the main attitude, and of course they are stuck in old ways of laughing and scoffing and debunking. But as we've acknowledged earlier, actually the majority of people aren't watching the BBC anymore. They're not getting their information from CNN and ITV. They're getting it from sources that are out there that, although clearly there is an attempt to control them and shut them down, but how long can you do that for? This stuff is out there. It is being discussed on a huge level. There is a new media now, and the attitude does seem to be one of much more open-mindedness. Plus, you've got the skeptics as well. You're always going to have both sides of it. But when we get upset when the BBC said something, why would we? You know, how many youngsters are watching the BBC anymore, taking their news as the news, and they're not. The danger is we all wind up in the echo chambers. This is a well-recognised problem, of course, where you only hear what you want to hear. That's not so good. I think we should try to keep our ears open to everything, and again, be aware of the other viewpoints. Otherwise, you know, we get trapped in these very narrow little conduits. I think if we can keep, you know, our eyes and ears open to other things as well, that is good. But yeah, it's moved. The story has moved already. People will find their way to what they want to find their way to, and assuming it doesn't all get shut down in an effort to control us. And we can see they're clearly trying. In the end, it might just prove too powerful to shut down, and that, you know, we'll have to come to some new recognition that this is the way the world is. People do have these interests, they do have these viewpoints, and you might not like it, but here they are, and you've got to face humanity, squarely in the eye. This is the way it is. And I think that at the moment it's contain, push down, don't let that be said. But if that's what somebody thinks, however horrific even it might be, if we pretend they're not there, you're just creating problems, because you've got a big lump under this big carpet where we're pretending there's not anything there, and in the end we're all tripping over the lump because we're all trying. It's just silly. You got to throw the carpet off, deal with it.
But that's actually happening.
Deal with it.
Tucker Carlson said last night on Joe Rogan, I don't know if you got to this bit in the interview, right? He said people who work at Capitol Hill are coming out of the train station, stepping over fellow Americans that have got drug problems, that they're homeless. They're literally stepping over them with their coffees in their hands, going up onto Capitol Hill and passing funding budgets to send $60 billion to the Ukraine because they're trying to convince people that everything's going to be fine and dandy and rosy with democracy over there, and we're sorting it all out, whilst they're physically stepping over their fellow Americans who can't. So that is literally happening. The bulge under the carpet is literally under people's feet, and we are in those times right now where the disjointed kind of thinking is right there, and I think that in itself is gonna work towards people going, hang on a minute, what is going on here? Because it's just gone beyond ridiculous now.
Well, the old way of governing the world simply no longer works, and the states that we have, they don't work. They're not going to work any better than they do now. The more AI comes in, the more the technology gets more complex, the less it will work, and we're going to see that. And then you get to a point where maybe only AI can even sort things out. If you have genuinely free AI that looks at everything, could it run it a lot worse? And that's where it's heading, that everything's already so complex, so actually we need the very technology we're creating to get ourselves out of where we're at. I mean, there's another sort of an optimistic view of it, but it might well be, what we're seeing now, the people we vote for, it clearly doesn't work. They can't sort the problems out. It's gone beyond that.
No.
And I think we're beginning to realise that. And the silly pretense that they are going to sort it all out, we need to lose that, and we need to find a new way of running things, basically. But maybe AI, like it or not, will be a part of that.
Well, yeah, I think if it's used in the right ways, and we change the goals, because at the moment it seems to clearly be potentially be used by these people that would seek to control us and use their own. I mean, as far as I can see, these politicians are corporate sellouts. We live in a corporatocracy, not a democracy. The corporations and the lobbyists are controlling these politicians to do the things that they're doing with the Ukraine, which ultimately then goes back to AI. If it's creating investment strategies based on the large military industrial complex, there's some complicity there with the way AI is telling it to spend its money on missiles in the Ukraine or whatever, and then do the rebuilding program after you've blown everything up. That's all part and parcel of this madness. But I watched a podcast with the Diary of the CEO earlier with Jimmy Carr. Jimmy Carr, this very intelligent comedian, talking about censorship and, you know, cancel culture. And it comes back to this thing we've been discussing about ending the polarization. And what they said is that, you know, I tell a joke and a lot of people don't like it, and a lot of people do. The difference now is about people being able to sit there and listen to something and go, I didn't like that, but I don't think I need to kill the person or jump on stage and try and stab them. And the Diary of the CEO guy said he's made it his mission over the last few years to friend people on social media who have completely opposing views to him. And I think some of that is the way that we're going to start ending this polarization and realizing what these politicians are doing, selling out and stuff like that, and realizing, you know, that it is a bit of a game. And that basically comes back to what you've said throughout your book, The New Heretics, isn't it? Ending polarization.
It can be done, but all the time money and power is driving the agenda and not common sense. We're going to have a barrier there. But now I think there's enough people coming through that can see that is, you know, they can see exactly what's going on. You can only keep the wool over people's eyes for so long. And that's true all around the world. I mean, and you know, we talk about Ukraine, but you know, the problems we've got with Putin and Russia, you know, they've got their own issues out there. You know, nothing makes any sense anymore. I don't know what the rights and wrongs of that situation are, but I do know this, that everything's highly complex, and anybody is still trying to drive an agenda which is about power and ego, they're no good for the world anymore. And we know this in our hearts of hearts. But I do see, interestingly, younger people coming through, and we tend to kind of dismiss them as the wokeism and all of this, but who can actually see more clearly, because they're coming into a world that they're just used to now, the digital world, what doesn't work. And it may well be that something will come out of that will create some whole new system. Now, whether it will be a system that we would understand or recognize, I don't know. But, you know, the crumbling away of something is usually the beginning of something as well. And we're seeing the crumbling of the existing, you know, institutions and all the infrastructure that's held us for a long, long, long time. But when it crumbles away, we always come up with something else. And history shows that, and we will again, I have no doubt. But we just need to streamline it so that what we don't wind up with is a very brutal revolution that doesn't take human feelings into account. But if actually we can actually transcend that and start to see, you know, that we all know ultimately what's right and wrong in our hearts. If we can actually make that work in the real world, not the silly fakeness that we've got everywhere at the moment, we might actually get somewhere. And if everybody does their little bit to work towards that and stops trying to look to that one person over there or that one party over there to do it, and you know they're not going to, it's going to be better. We need to step up. Everybody needs to take some responsibility, do one thing. You can't change the whole world. No one person can do that. No. But you can do your one thing. Focus on what you can do to knock the dominoes and shift people somewhere positive. If everybody does that, something will happen. It will have to happen. It's just that at the moment we're still always, they'll sort it out. No, they won't. They're not going to be able to sort out the problems we've got. That's why the roads here are so full of holes now. They can't either afford to mend them, they haven't got the system to mend them. That's just a tiny little example, a weeny little example of where it's at. That's why the NHS can't function anymore. It won't function in the way that it used to. Everything's changed. But something new might yet come in that will say, all right, we don't use the old model, we use a new model. And at the moment, seeing what that is isn't so easy, but something will come. Something will come, because it usually does.